Okay. Um, um, the latest news is about the escalation of um, the military in Venezuela and how stability or destabilization is also against security. This is the sort of the equation that was given on MSAB CIA news recently today, this morning. Actually, I had it on where I was listening. So I have a personal history with Venezuela. um I was fortunate to have a friend who told me about qigong master Chen Yilin, actually, and she said she had meditated with him before he was known. She said it was just her and a philosophy professor that he mentioned, that Chen Yulin also mentioned, having given Chen Yulin the book The Holographic Universe to read. And so my friend from Venezuela, I at the time I had a VHS of the Kogi people. That book was called The Heart of the World and was made into a video. It's on YouTube. And but back then, this was in 1997, and she was really shocked that I knew about the Kogi people. And I had the VHS and documentary that she watched also, and that sort of struck up our friendship because she was from a nearby indigenous tribe that had pretty much been kind of like wiped out by modern, industrialization or whatever. And she had been adopted by Italian immigrants, or Venezuelans of Italian ethnicity. And I didn't know this, but recently learned, like in Colombia, the Spanish Y chromosome is found, I guess, in all the Colombians, and there's hardly any. I mean, it probably depends where they're, you know, like the Uwa people are indigenous tribe in the equatorial rainforest in Colombia. And I had confronted Al Gore about his family wealth being from Occidental Petroleum that was then threatening to invade the Uwa territory to look for oil. So, anyway, I pointed out before that even like the Atlantic Monthly on the internet, on YouTube, they do not go into the U.S. history in Venezuela. The book Year 501 by Noam Chomsky does go into that history, so most people don't read Noam Chomsky. I just gave my book away to a relative to encourage her to read it, or them. But anyway, it's obviously, um it's very troubling. And the thing is that my friend my friend and I, we actually ended up going to Venezuela. Um, I thought I could do self-directed research there about the ecology in the Andes because there was a chapter about it, that rare ecology, which is Merida. Oh, it says I'm losing my connection. Anyway, let me close some of my tabs. That might help. But yeah, so essentially the the when we got there, I basically was at her control. She took me around. It was a great time. I mean, we did actually. We brought some pink indigenous corn that a friend of mine gave me, and so she liked that. It was indigenous variety of corn, and so we her one of her local friends helped us clear a field of rocks, of stones, and then we planted the corn, and she told me that it actually did grow in. And then we talked to one of the neighbors, and they were actually barefoot. So this peasant family was obviously, you know, poor in terms of money, and they said that they had never voted before, but they're going to vote for Hugo Chavez. And sure enough, that was in 1998. Then he did get elected, and then it turns out that basically he forced out the U.S. Oil corporations because he was essentially nationalized the oil. And and ironically, okay, so I ended up befriending or becoming friends with another friend of hers who moved in with her, and actually she invited me to move in to her house that she had from if her former marriage or whatever. And so essentially, there was several Venezuelans and me, and there was my friend moved in. Actually, a couple of my friends. It was we're young university student. I was a graduate student, but I wasn't 30 yet, so I was still young in terms of um. But yeah. So the other friend, I helped her get a really good job. She had been a pharmacist in Caracas, and when I first met her, she told me that she was in Caracas in 1989 when there was literally a massacre of, I don't know, like hundreds of people who were protesting the US control of the oil in Venezuela, the current regime. And Noam Chomsky refers to this in his book. He talks about this massacre or whatever. He goes into the history, and I posted on my blog. I gave the link in the chat here, but I basically his book's online. I gave the link in my blog. You can read his book for free. But the book's called Year 501: The Conquest Continues, and so anyway, his her dad turns out we stayed at her dad's house in Caracas, and her dad had been the negotiator for OPEC, and he went to Columbia University in New York City, probably like in the 50s or something. And that of course is a big CIA school because they have the Russia Institute there, which is essentially like a CIA front. And um So he actually got kidnapped by the Jackal or the OPEC. He was at the OPEC meeting when the Jackal kidnapped them, and the Jackal was also Venezuelan, but he was like a leftist, terrorist. And he wrote a screenplay about it, and he wanted me to get it into Hollywood, and because I was from the U.S., so obviously I had connections. and and he had it printed out on a dot matrix, and like parts of it you could barely read because all those like the print ink runs out, whatever. And I actually brought the screenplay home, but of course, I didn't do anything with it because I don't have any connections to Hollywood, and I think I pretty much made that clear to him. So, um, but at least his daughter got a really good job, but the point is like I was able to directly engage with kind of like a wide variety of the society in Venezuela. I was there for almost 3 weeks. I think it was like 2.5 weeks. And actually I had this vision, this dramatic life review vision in Venezuela. And it was partly because of my meditation, but it was also mainly due because I had gotten bacterial, you know, reaction because we drank chicha, which is fermented potato wine or beer, and or I obviously like that's gonna happen if you're not like adapted to the local bacteria or whatever. and since, her dad had been a doctor, so he gave me, an diarrhea medication, and I so after, like, just recently, a few years ago, I finally looked it up because 'cause I'm like, "I wonder," and it turns out that that medication actually activates your vagus nerve, which kinda makes sense because the vagus nerve is what causes, your intestinal, like, contractions, that causes you to evacuate your bowels essentially. But, I had been, we were vegetarian at the time, and, um, so I had this overactivation of the vagus nerve along with my feelings to my friends, and my friend, being celibate and meditation, all this, and so all of a sudden, I couldn't sleep at night, and my heart got really, really hot, and I felt this great sense of love in my heart, and then all of a sudden, I decided to start singing to myself to s to s in it while I sat in a chair because I thought that might help me, calm my mind and so I could go to sleep, and then all of a sudden, my brain just, like, clicked into this visionary state that I could not stop, and my whole life, like, passed before me, but really rapidly, but not like linear, not in linear chronology, but it was based on the meaning of my life being interwoven and how one little event that happened years later actually healed an event that happened years before. Like this kept happening like super fast, like at the speed of light in my brain, like all the visions of my life. I could see how all these little things were connected, energetically, and like psychologically. And then when the vision ended, I was like, wow, that's that deep sense of love kind of made k- sort of, I had this life review, which at the time I wasn't that old, so it wasn't, but at any rate, I didn't say anything to my friend about it. But the next morning, I was just really, really quiet because I felt this deep sense of peace, and I didn't know it was connected to um, the medication that I'd been given, but because I just felt this great sense of love, from the reaction. I didn't know that was the catalyst for the this psychedelic vision. And then basically, I didn't do the research, I was planning on it, but the glacier has melted for Merida. They had a year-round glacier, but because of global warming, it's gone now, and that's the first city in the world that's completely lost its glacier, apparently. I did a blog post on that too. Let me see if I can find it. Um, yeah, here it is. So it's kind of ironic that they're like all about getting the oil. We got to get the oil. When in fact, abrupt global warming has already like permanently changed the Andes in Venezuela, and Venezuela is like really beautiful in terms of the variety of ecosystems. I mean, because you got the Andes, and there's like cacti up there and stuff, and it's like the flora and fauna or whatever. And then of course, you have the rainforest, which I didn't go to, but well, I met another Venezuelan guy, and he was he had been a rainforest guide for tourists, in Venezuela, and he was like this macho kind of guy, and he was a new father, and I didn't really talk to him much because the whole like macho thing, but let's see. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember anything else, but essentially, um, um, we had a great time. Like she was able to go around and talk to her friends, and I would just sit and wait outside because that's what I preferred to do anyway. And sometimes her friends visited us at the house, and we had dinner with her parents, and it was all a really nice trip. And sometimes I'd go into town on my own in Merida because I knew a little bit of Spanish. And yeah, so obviously I can't, I feel terrible now because it's like, well, being from the US, like it's a hard situation. But on the other hand, like you can see where obviously, the problem, like even the so-called leftists, they realize that just having oil as your primary economy makes the economy really vulnerable to corruption and cartels and monopolies and sanctions, and everything that's happened was pretty predictable because you don't just cut off the oil, because that's what happened in Iran. What the Rockefellers have been getting the oil money from Iran after the CIA coup there in 1953, and of course they want it back. They want that oil revenue back because it's the U.S. petrodollar. That I wrote a paper in 1998, and I was able to predict. Um, yeah, thanks. I know it was really cool when I think back on it. Um, but yeah, I predicted the U.S. would invade Iraq again, based on Noam Chomsky's analysis in 1998, and so that is what the petrodollar is all about. Is this oil military empire, and yeah, it's really tragic. So I did talk to my friend a few years ago. We connected again and we talked on the phone. We had a really great conversation, and she was just super friendly to me, and so that was really nice. Basically, I told her, well, I am a hermit, for the most part. Um, so yep. But that's all I wanted to say, is that it's going to be. Um, I mean, Venezuela, they have a long history of protesting against the U.S. control of their oil. So it's obviously there. And then and the other thing is, I've just been shocked. I mean, I haven't been shocked, but the basically CIA propaganda on the so-called like leftist news, which is MS what I've called MSABCIA for a long time. That's been my joke, what I call that show. But yeah, it's just been really, really blatant. Even though they say it's about the oil, they don't say it's necessarily wrong. They're just like, well, how can the US control Venezuela? You know. um and yeah, and obviously they've proven that Trump has lied about regime change. Like, he originally claimed he was against regime change and really outspoken about it, and everybody thought that was so cool. But it's like, well, yeah, he's a child rapist, so you have to realize that a child rapist is the lowest scum evil in prison, and everything they say is going to be a lie based on that original, child rapist lie. So it just gets worse from there. Like, everything he does will get worse, guaranteed, because he's a child rapist, and that's what people don't realize. Yeah, the thing about Venezuela is that the plan was to increasingly supply China and Russia through Venezuela. And of course, Marco Rubio, he wants to get rid of the Cuban, so-called regime or whatever. I mean, I have had two friends that I've known personally who went to Cuba. So, um, but I mean, obviously, if they don't talk, like, that's the other thing in the corporate media. They don't mention that the sanctions against Venezuela, that was half of their GDP was selling to the U.S. And so, now Trump is bragging how he now is in control of Venezuelan oil that was previously sanctioned. But he put in the sanctions, and then so it's like, just like David Icke used to always say, you create the problem and then you solve the problem to escalate or whatever, this fake solution. And yeah, so obviously, if the other thing is, they're saying that they don't have to worry about Iran because Iran could easily close off the Strait of, what is it, Hormuz or something like that. But so in other words, with Venezuela, they're not dependent on Iran for oil, in terms of the global production. Um, so that's another factor. Yeah, Hormuz. Thank you. I get like, there it is. Okay, this laptop doesn't get, my glasses have to. I don't know, but anyway, yeah. So that's pretty much it. But obviously, but the thing is that global warming is much worse. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, global warming is much worse than people realize. So if you go to Arctic News, there's a new post at Arctic News, and the methane is going up for sure out of the Arctic, and this means, I mean, they are predicting that the methane is going to have an abrupt eruption, and it will increase temperature significantly, and it'll be very difficult to grow food. And like the Colorado River is already like, it's mainstream news now that it's game over for the Colorado River, because the reservoirs are drying up again, and they're like, because of global warming, there's not enough snow for the snow melt, whatever. And anyway, I'm gonna shut this down, and it's gonna be interesting. But I feel bad, but yeah, I'm glad I was able to get to Venezuela right before, sort of to do my part to help the Bolivar revolution, as it were. And it's unfortunate that, because they're not like the leftist scenes, they're not like pro-indigenous necessarily, but Hugo was definitely, like, he's not as indigenous as the Ecuadorian guy, I think, or Bolivia maybe it was. But anyway, all right, over and out. Happy New Year.